R. Kelly. For decades, rumors circulated about R. Kelly's behavior with underage girls, but his music continued playing on radio stations and streaming platforms across the world. The documentary Surviving R. Kelly changed everything when it aired in 2019, bringing survivors forward with detailed testimonies of abuse that stretched back years. Public pressure mounted immediately, and the hashtag #MuteRKelly campaign gained momentum with activists demanding platforms stop profiting from his music. When Kelly was convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering in 2021, the response was coordinated and decisive. YouTube removed his official channels, citing community guidelines violations. Major radio groups voluntarily stopped playing his songs, and streaming services added content warnings while removing him from promotional playlists. This represented a new kind of blacklist, one driven by survivor testimony and public outcry rather than government censorship. Technology gave activists direct channels to pressure corporations, and those corporations responded to protect their reputations. The blacklist was crowd-driven, built from the ground up by people demanding accountability rather than imposed from above by authorities. If you want to see how power really operates in the music industry, hit that subscribe button right now. The Dixie Chicks. Natalie Maines made a single comment on a London stage in 2003 that would destroy the Dixie Chicks' country music career overnight. She told the crowd that they were ashamed President Bush was from Texas, a reference to the Iraq War that was about to begin. Within hours, country radio stations across America were flooded with calls demanding the Chicks be removed from playlists. Program directors faced threats of advertiser boycotts and listener protests if they continued playing the group's music. Clear Channel, which owned hundreds of country stations, effectively blacklisted them across their entire network. Album sales collapsed as fans returned CDs to stores and organized public destruction of their merchandise. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming, with death threats arriving regularly and concert venues canceling appearances due to security concerns. For nearly a decade, the Dixie Chicks were exiled from country radio, unable to get airplay regardless of song quality or chart potential. They eventually returned after rebranding as the Chicks in 2020, but their relationship with country music never fully recovered. The blacklist demonstrated how quickly audience anger can turn into industry-wide boycotts when political statements conflict with fan expectations. Kishore Kumar. Kishore Kumar was India's voice during Bollywood's golden era, a playback singer whose songs defined an entire generation and became the soundtrack to millions of lives. In 1976, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's government demanded he perform at a youth congress event during the emergency period when civil liberties were suspended. Kumar refused to provide political endorsement through his performance, a decision that carried immediate consequences in an authoritarian climate. On May 4th, a government memo circulated to every broadcaster in India with explicit instructions. All songs by Kishore Kumar were banned from All India Radio and Doordarshan, the state-controlled television network that reached every corner of the country. Record stores were pressured to freeze sales of his albums, and film producers dropped him from upcoming projects out of fear they would face government retaliation. For 6 weeks, one of India's most beloved artists was erased from the airwaves as if his contributions to culture meant nothing. Only when opposition leaders like Bal Thackeray applied political pressure did the government quietly lift the ban. Kumar's career recovered, but every artist in India understood the message clearly. Defy the government during the emergency and lose your voice regardless of talent or popularity. Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson stood as one of America's most celebrated voices during the 1940s, a multilingual baritone whose talent transcended borders and languages. His support for civil rights and favorable comments about the Soviet Union made him a target during the Cold War's anti-communist paranoia. By 1949, the State Department revoked his passport, effectively trapping him inside the United States and preventing international tours that had sustained his career. Radio stations received quiet instructions to stop playing his music, television networks closed their doors, and concert venues canceled his appearances. Robeson went from filling halls across the country to becoming the most vilified American alive according to contemporary accounts. The government spied on him, threatened him, and erased him from public life while he remained physically present in his own country. For nearly a decade, his music disappeared from American airwaves as if he had never existed. Only a Supreme Court ruling in 1958 restored his passport rights, but by then the prime years of his career had been stolen. The blacklist demonstrated how Cold War fears could destroy even the most accomplished artists when their politics threatened the status quo. Pete Seeger. Pete Seeger refused to cooperate when the House Un-American Activities Committee demanded he name names during their investigation of alleged communist infiltration in entertainment. They convicted him of contempt in 1955, a charge later overturned but not before inflicting serious career damage. Network television banned him outright, and for over a decade, one of America's most influential folk musicians could not appear on major broadcasts. The Weavers disbanded under pressure from venues and promoters who feared association with suspected communists. Seeger survived by touring college campuses and small venues, beyond the reach of network blacklists, or places where young audiences hungry for authentic music welcomed him despite the political climate. He kept folk traditions alive until the 1960s revival brought him back into mainstream acceptance, but those lost years of network exposure could never be recovered. The Blacklist showed how political persecution could sideline major talent through coordinated industry pressure, even when legal convictions were eventually overturned. His eventual rehabilitation came only when cultural attitudes shifted and the Red Scare paranoia faded into embarrassment. Sinead O'Connor. Sinead O'Connor appeared on Saturday Night Live in October 1992 and did something nobody expected during her performance. After singing an a cappella version of Bob Marley's War, she held up a photo of Pope John Paul II, tore it into pieces on live television, and said, "Fight the real enemy." The response was immediate and severe. NBC banned her from their network for life, an official decision that prevented her from appearing on any NBC programming again. New York radio stations pulled her music from their playlists, refusing to play her songs regardless of their chart positions. When she appeared at a Bob Dylan tribute concert at Madison Square Garden just 2 weeks later, the audience booed her so loudly she couldn't perform. Her career in America effectively ended that night, with radio stations maintaining their ban and venues refusing to book her performances. The Blacklist lasted for years, with O'Connor unable to access mainstream American media platforms that had previously supported her work. She remained defiant about her protest against the Catholic Church's handling of sexual abuse, but the professional cost was devastating and permanent. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday recorded Strange Fruit in 1939, a haunting song about the lynching of Black Americans in the South that described bodies hanging from trees. Columbia Records refused to release it, claiming it was too controversial and would damage their business relationships. Holiday recorded it with a smaller label, but radio stations across America refused to play the song, particularly in southern states where segregation was legally enforced. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics, led by Harry Anslinger, targeted Holiday specifically after she continued performing Strange Fruit despite pressure to stop. Anslinger had agents follow her, arrest her on drug charges, and when she was hospitalized near the end of her life in 1959, they handcuffed her to the bed and forbade doctors from treating her drug addiction. The Bureau revoked her cabaret card in New York City, which was required to perform in venues that served alcohol, effectively banning her from working in most of the city's music clubs. Holiday spent her final years unable to perform in major venues, blacklisted through a combination of official government harassment and industry fear of her political message about racial violence. The Weavers. The Weavers were one of America's most popular folk groups in the early 1950s, with hit songs that topped charts and filled concert halls nationwide. Pete Seeger, Lee Hayes, Ronnie Gilbert, and Freddie Hellerman performed together until 1952, when they were officially blacklisted after being named in Red Channels, a publication listing alleged communist sympathizers in entertainment. Decca Records dropped them immediately, concert venues canceled bookings, and television networks refused them on broadcasts. The blacklist was coordinated across the industry, with booking agents and promoters pressured to avoid the group entirely. Harvey Matusow, a former Communist Party member turned FBI informant, testified that 3 Weaver members were communists, adding their names to official industry blacklists circulated amongst venues and media companies. The group disbanded in 1952 because they could no longer find work, victims of anti-communist hysteria that targeted individual members like Seeger. They briefly reunited in 1955 for a Carnegie Hall concert, but their mainstream career never recovered. Comment your thoughts, like, share, and subscribe for more videos.